My name is Andriana Vojnovic, and I'm a research associate at the TNGO Initiative and the Maxwell School. I'm undertaking a brief career interview with Ms. Nisha Agrawal, CEO of Oxfam India. Ms. Agrawal, thank you very much for taking your time to sit down with us today. I'd like to start off by hearing your own brief explanation of your work as a CEO of Oxfam India and the work that Oxfam India does.
So Oxfam India is a rights-based advocacy organization. We advocate for the rights of poor and marginalized people. And we do it in a way where we fund work, we work jointly with partners who work at the grassroots level. And we use that experience then to try and reform systems and policies that affect their lives all the way from national to global levels.
Now, could you take us through your own career path up until becoming the CEO of Oxfam India, very briefly?
I'm trained in economics. I did until my master's level in India, and then I came to the US to do a PhD at the University of Virginia in economics. And then I went to work at a research organization in Melbourne. I like to travel, so I kind of came and spent some time here, and then I wanted to see some other part of the world, so I applied to Australia and Canada as English-speaking places, and I got into this place, and I thought I was going for a year, but I spent 5 years there because I really enjoyed it. And at that time, then for personal reasons, I needed to come back to Washington. And I applied to the World Bank, and I got into the Young Professional Program, where they take about 20-25 people every year as development professionals. And then I stayed with the World Bank for 20 years. I really enjoyed the work there. I spent 10 years in Washington, and then the bank decentralized in a big way in '97. So I moved out to Vietnam. I was in the field there for 5 years, leading the poverty and social development team, where I really got a chance to work with NGOs and a lot of different players who work together with them. And then I went to spend 5 years in Cambodia, where I headed the bank's office. I was the country manager for the World Bank in Cambodia. And at that time, both for personal and professional reasons, I turned 50 and I thought, I'd been away from India for 30 years. And I always knew I would come back to India, and I thought this would be a good moment because I still I could still work there and get to know a lot of people and come back to my family. Parents were getting old. So a mix of personal and professional reasons. And I was very, very lucky that Oxfam India was just being formed at that moment, and they got in touch with me because I'd worked a lot with Oxfam in my Vietnam days in particular. And they were setting up Oxfam India, and they asked me to be on the board. And then when I told them that I was thinking of leaving the bank and moving back to India, they asked me to apply for the CEO position, which I did, and I got it. And so it was a very smooth transition back to India after 30 years of being away, in the perfect job and back with my family in the city where I grew up, where my family lives. So really, I've been very, very lucky, I have to say.
Now, you have been with Oxfam India for 5 years. And I'm assuming there's a lot of very responsible strategic work, but also a lot of hands-on work. Can you describe a typical day for you? What should students imagine?
So as I said, the bulk of our work on the ground is done with and through partners. And they're working in the 7 poorest states of India with the most marginalized groups. So what we are very bad at, NGOs, is documenting things. So if I want to know what's happening in India or what a partner is doing, I have to go there. So a typical day might look like getting up at 6 in the morning, getting onto a train, going to Uttar Pradesh, the state next door, UP, and going into the field, seeing what one partner is doing on education, bringing together then all the other 20, 30 NGOs that we are working in that state with, asking them where there are opportunities for pushing the agenda, what's happening on the political front, and so on. So doing that, bringing that back then to Delhi, sitting with the team and saying, this seems to be working, this is not working, should we move in that direction, and so on. So a lot of my time is spent in the field, and especially in my first 5 years. Now, as I'm focusing more and more on fundraising, because that seems to be the new challenge. Instead of spending my time in Chhattisgarh and Jharkhand and UP, I'm spending my time more and more in Bombay and Bangalore, which is the other half of India. And I go and we have this fantastic fundraising event, Trail Walker, where people walk 100 kilometers in 48 hours, and they raise money for us. And a lot of the corporates are interested in participating with their teams. So I go and I talk to corporate CEOs, and I encourage them to send their teams, but also to make them familiar with Oxfam's work. So I would be flying to Bangalore and, giving a talk to 300 employees of some large corporate. So it's two very mixed worlds, really being grounded all the time to really know what's happening at the ground level, and then trying to persuade the other half of India to fund that work, if you like, being the bridge between the two Indias.
Now, can you provide some career advice for our students, especially for those who are interested in pursuing careers in advocacy, humanitarian assistance, or development? What are the skills that they need to develop in order to be successful in the field?
I think the first thing is to really know, is this what you want to do with your life? The passion and that commitment for this work, as opposed to anything else, is what distinguishes NGO workers. It's not surprising to me that, especially say for my American friends who are in the NGO world, many of them started as Peace Corps workers. So very early on, there was this lust for travel, for being in places that are very difficult personally to live in, very challenging, but wanting to give back, wanting to be in some other geography, some other history, some other culture. All that has to be there. And then you got hooked onto it, and then they made a career out of it in the NGO world. So it's not something, that you say, okay, I might interview with Oxfam, or I'll interview with a bank or something else. It's not just like a typical career. I think it's a mission. And that has to be there because the circumstances are difficult. I mean, I think most jobs are 24/7. I mean, it's not to say that we work harder than people in some other corporate sector or something else. We work equally hard. But what motivates us is that desire to make a difference to somebody else's life, not your own life. Very early on, that has to be there. So that to me is the main ingredient, because the training is the same. I mean, I'm trained as an economist. I could go into 10,000 different careers with the same training. So it's not about like, what should I be studying? It's never about that, I think.
Thank you. This is a perfect ending for our brief career interview for the NGO initiative. Thank you very much for being here today.
You're very welcome. Thank you.